I was a warrior who dreamed he could bring peace. Sooner or later, though, you always have to wake up.
Regardless of how you feel about this movie, you can't deny that it helps change cinema for the better. We love not just this movie, but the world that was created within it. Before we soar into this video, make sure you're linked up properly by hitting that subscribe button and the bell next to it.
Look, at first, it was just orders. And then everything changed. I fell in love with the Omatikaya people. With you.
This story is great, and there are quite a few layers that add volumes to this world's development. You have the humans who are on Pandora for unobtainium. The Na'vi just want to protect their home, and even Jake is learning to care about a new world and all of the opportunities that come with that. Jake in the beginning seems like a level-headed Marine, but he is trigger ready. His motivation makes sense as he wants the ability to walk again. It isn't something that a vet will necessarily have money to correct or will even be placed on a long waiting list. He had an opportunity to run with,
very poor choice of words,
and also finish what his twin brother started. Jake takes action to prove his worth by accepting the position as an Avatar wielder. His workmates view him as an equal over time, and even the Na'vi come to trust Jake as a sky people for the most part. By becoming the legendary Taruk Makto, in this position within the Na'vi was to finalize his trust and true love for the Omatikaya people, but also a last resort to save his dear friend, Grace, from death. What is enjoyable about this movie is the overall message it provides and almost a wake-up call. It proves that greed can lead to destruction of not only another planet, but of the people too. The true insensitivity this greed can bring, which also causes violence and a superior attitude that can be outright deadly. We see this happen when these innocent lives are removed from their homes and loss of their loved ones. So how can we be better? We can take a stand against these wrongful activities. We see Trudy decide to not be a part of the destruction. We should say, I see you, to the life that is at stake, and not destroy it, and realize the impact our decisions can make, not just to the environment, but the sustainability of the future. Earth was lost from this ignorance. Do we want to take another world with it? People have mentioned that this movie pulls from other things like Dances with Wolves. In reality, everything pulls from something, and the way that this movie handles the theme is fantastic. Perfect example of this is when the humans destroy Home Tree. We literally see families holding their children and even each other. The Na'vi are based on the Native Americans, and this visual touch of detail makes you feel sympathetic for the Na'vi and is something that most storytellers wouldn't even add.
They talked Moad into letting Grace into the village. It's the first time since the school was closed down.
As a viewer, you get expressions from Jake of the Earth's predicament not being livable and the economy is collapsing. Jake grew up hearing about Pandora. That's like what, for at least 20 years? Pandora is mentioned as a safe haven and a place of fiction because not many can go there. In the extended version, you visit Earth in the very beginning and see many are wearing masks, and the coffee is like $12. I mean, if you look at Starbucks coffee, are we seriously almost there? Yes, we're mentioning the extended version in our scripts briefly because they're adding to the lore of Pandora and the character development of Jake Sully. But even with these extra 7 to 16 minutes of story, they were understandably removed. Grace's connection she had to the students as a mother, or even the mentioning of Neytiri's sister. Maybe placed properly, they could have been great one-liners, but as an added scene, it was certainly meant for the fan base and not a theatrical movie. I will say that Tasute's death would have been a nice touch, although completely heartbreaking, because in the ending minutes of the movie, we physically see Trudy's death by crash and Norm no longer in an avatar state, but a human state. Granted, Tasute fell out of a helicopter with arrows in him, but we could have thought he was caught by another flyer or by instinct landed on the tree leaves. We have to assume he is gone. I like that the extended version gave Jake the option of passing along his life in prayer and the final strike. Joe and I also love the added touch or viewpoint to Jake's character development. Not just that he is a Marine, but that he is in a wheelchair. We personally have never been placed in this situation. Me working in the medical field, having this action removed from someone who once had that sense of touch or movement could feel useless or have other deep emotions. When we see Jake connect with his avatar the first time and he is wiggling his toes, standing up on his own, able to run on his own 2 legs again, and then physically feel the soft dirt under his feet and toes, we as a viewer enjoy this moment with him. We can only imagine his sensory overload of excitement and see that written all over his face. It was also a nice added touch from a book Joe read called Directing Actors by Judith Weston. She stated, "Disability can be transformed into vitality." In the book, she expressed a brief personal connection to the movie and the actions of a wheelchair-stricken family member. How this movie incorporates this detail is important and many times overlooked. This movie is still flawless for being over 10 years old. From the water trickling on their skin, the ashes falling from the sky, to the vibrant war paints, and not to mention the added details of their every steps providing electrical impulses on the ground. This is not just world building, this is beautiful cinematography. We can only imagine the new movie's CGI updates.
Killing the indigenous looks bad. There's one thing that shareholders hate more than bad press, and that's a bad quarterly statement.
Parker is only on Pandora for the unobtainium, which is the main source of income for these humans or sky people. He doesn't care what is at stake as long as his quarterly requirements are met. We see he is visibly frustrated for the length of time he has, in a way, wasted by his patience with the school and trying to strike bargains with the Na'vi to get full access to their lands. We do see him slightly falter when his final actions of destruction are being taken place. He looks away from the windows and even the screens. He does give Grace and Jake an extra hour to try and save the Na'vi because he does not want the bloodshed of children on his hands. Yes, he is still the villain of the movie because in the end he gives the final call, but we still see the strikes of humanity in him is at war. Now, Quaritch is the overall villain of this storyline.
We will blast a crater in their racial memory so deep that they won't come within 1,000 clicks of this place ever again. And that, too, is a fact.
This man proves time and time again that he has no limits and will not stop. The amount of times this man can go maskless is freaking crazy. He's literally asking for a death wish each time. Quaritch is the true villain or antagonist of this story. It is clarified that he is a strong fighter as he refused to leave after day 1 of being attacked by the Na'vi with poisonous arrows and a creature slashing up his face. Him being this strong of a fighter and this much background on land makes him the perfect leader for this army, which we see him thrive in this destruction. He states he will do minimal damage to the Aboriginals, but we see him be a great tactician in this way as he kept his word with Jake that he only had 3 months to get the job done, to know what they want and get them to move from the site. He does not care that they are protecting their land as he has a job to do, to get that unobtainium.
How much lab training have you had?
I dissected a frog once.
You see? You see? I mean, they're just pissing on us without even the courtesy of calling it rain.
Grace takes her position very seriously, and this is understandable as she has hinted at many years of research of the land. She not only wrote a book, but had a school program and is now training these new rookies the way of the Avatar. Her knowledge is unstoppable, and we see how passionate she is of the Na'vi. No doubt she is jealous, yet impressed that Jake is able to get past a barrier that she was so close to before, access to the home tree, and later the Tree of Souls. When her life is coming to an end, you can see she never stops her research.
I need to take some samples.
Then when she makes the connection to Mother, you see the relief and again, that passion of the land that she has fallen in love with.
I'm with her, Drake. She's real.
She is with Ewa now.
Trudy just outright adds to the kinder side of the humans' army. Her sass helps keep the situations somewhat tolerable. We see her take the physical action of taking a side against inhumane actions, which leads to Max Patel, who is our indoor scientist. In the end, he gets to stay behind on Pandora, and I hope we get to see more of him. Tasute of the Ometakaya, he has a huge impact on Jake. He pushes Jake to go to the next level, and even though he calls him a moron, he sees Jake as a brother in the end. So much so that he translates during an encouraging speech and fights alongside Jake. This was because his respect was earned by Jake becoming the Turok Makto, as this was a very big statement to claim, an act of endurance, and even showing his heartfelt knowledge of the Ometakaya's way of living. This had a big impact on Tasute.
Our great mother does not take sides, Jake. She protects only the balance of life.
Neytiri is a bold Omaticaya character along with her mother Moat. We come to acknowledge that she has a lot of strength, brilliance, and endurance throughout the movie. Neytiri was in Grace's school, so it is visible that she understands and is able to communicate in English. This led her in the role of teaching Jake Sully the ways of the Na'vi, even if she was not a fan of that original request. Neytiri knows that he has to be important if the seeds of the sacred tree show a sign of his importance to the land. She reflects on how he acts like a baby and his instincts because, understandably, he is still adjusting to his new legs and the body he is inhabiting as an avatar. We too see how he is not so grateful while going to places and he is consistently not following his instincts. This is also a good telling of her fighting and hunting skills. When she is teaching Jake, we see her constantly adjusting his body or smacking him and even showing him tracking in the dirt. We know she can ride and fly just as well. Once Jake has earned his place, she continues to teach him the way of strategizing their flying skills. Even during the final battle, she is fighting right alongside Jake, and he knows that she is a strong warrior when he has to yell for her to stand down.
Do not attack!
Fall back now! Get out of there! That's an order!
Over the course of time, we see her start to connect with Jake on a personal level. I suspect she finds his fresh eyes of the land adorable and that his humor is entertaining. But when Jake makes his first kill and proceeds with the sacred prayer of life, this show of respect has affected her. She sees his humility to the mother and the gratitude of life being provided or had lived. She opens her heart fully to him, and they mate for life by doing the nasty.
Oh, shit.
So it is understandable that when Jake confesses his original intentions, feelings of overwhelming affect her, and even the action of war is close to their doorstep, and then shortly after losing her father. We can feel the emotions of her in the moment of hatred and true fear. Fear for herself, her people, and for their main source of life. Her reactions are justified. Jake knows this reaction is understandable, and he should have been more open. He knows how to make the correction by becoming the Truak Makto, the people's historical leader.
I was afraid, Jake, for my people. I'm not anymore.
The strength of Jake's return to her arms has an impact on her. Not for the fact that she was most likely missing him, but to know that he risked his life for the connection with the mighty creature, but to also be humbled enough to know the history of the Omaticaya and how important his actions symbolize toward the love of the people. He chose a side, her side.
So you just figured you'd come out here with no training of any kind and see how it went?
Maybe I was sick of doctors telling me what I couldn't do.
Jake is clearly a Marine, but he is also a deeply caring person. They do really well by showing him as his own person in comparison to his twin brother. Though they share the same gene pool, we see a clear distinction that they both had separate careers and that his brother was very knowledgeable, and also considered a friendly guy since Norm seemed to have cared for him kindly. We see Jake is really indifferent to both sides at the beginning, and his motivation for it all makes sense. He wants to be able to walk again. Even mid-movie, he is struggling with the Na'vi language.
You need to listen to what she says. Try to see the forest through her eyes.
This moment reminds me of the Pocahontas song called Colors of the Wind, and for obvious reasons we cannot play the song, but the lines where she tells John Smith, she states, "But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew." This was a perfect explanation that Grace is trying to point out to Jake. But once he really listens to Grace about seeing the world from Neytiri's eyes, we see Jake start to truly change. He is no longer thinking as a Marine breaking down his gun and rebuilding it. He sees the connection to the land.
I'm trying to understand this deep connection that people have to the forest. She talks about a network of energy. She says all energy is only borrowed, and one day you have to give it back.
Jake, after providing not only a clean kill with a prayer of thanks, and then proving himself by making a connection with Ikran, he truly starts to understand this life. He even confesses the confusion or conflict that is starting to build inside him.
Everything is backwards now. Like out there is the true world, and in here is the dream.
He fell in love with not just Neytiri, but the land too. He understands that they are fighting for a network of pure and clean power of Pandora. He has grown familiar with their way of living and sees that he is thriving with happiness and making choices from his own heart instead of a manipulation or rhythm that he was used to in the very beginning. He no longer has to take orders when he can give them and protect a whole economy while doing so. We see Jake asking for direction from the Tree of Souls because he knows the knowledge it can hold and the sway it has on the Omaticaya people for enriching their lives. But he finalized his stance by becoming the Turak Vakto, the Omatikaya's true leader.
The Na'vi say that every person is born twice. The second time is when you earn your place among the people. Forever.
Avatar is a thought-provoking, world-building dream of an adventure, and if you haven't seen it yet, we encourage you to do so. With this new movie just around the corner, we can't wait to see more of this world and Sully's story. What is your favorite moment of Avatar? What are you looking forward to in the sequel? Let's keep the fun going in the comments. Until our next video, stay nerdy and keep binging.